Hello, and welcome to Face to Face again. Tonight we have a great show for you. The topic is marijuana and the many laws that go along with it and what you need to know about them. Joining us today at the table is Andrew Maternowski. He is a criminal and he's a criminal defense attorney that has been practicing in Indiana for almost 29 years. And our other guest is Ethan Wieland. He's a Purdue Ag-Econ student, the vice president and spokesman of Purdue NORML. And we'll be discussing also the latest marijuana legalization efforts in the state of Indiana specifically. So let's just get into it and, so our viewers know a little bit more about you guys. Ethan, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about Purdue NORML?
Yeah, so Purdue NORML was founded back in 1993, but then went on a hiatus for a few years and was restarted by one of my good friends, Chris Thompson, in 2013. And we had a great team of board of directors, kind of built this club up from nothing back into something today. And our primary goals are to educate the public and Purdue students and advocate for the legalization of marijuana. Those are our two primary goals, and we do that with a lot of different things. We have bi-weekly club meetings where we get our members together and just talk about current issues in the marijuana debates, the legalization debate, that type of thing. We also have some events throughout the year where we try to do things to give back to the community. Purdue's winterization project, we've participated in that for the past few years, and similar programs like that, Relay for Life, things like that.
Perfect, yeah. And Andrew, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure so much that you can elaborate for us, or illuminate for us on this subject. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've been practicing I'm in my 29th year. Practiced throughout the state of Indiana and federal courts. We have 92 counties in the state. I've practiced in over 80 of them, and most of that has been drug defense and primarily marijuana.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the kind of the situation with marijuana in the United States right now, specifically kind of in Indiana. I know that you can kind of tell us a little bit about how opinions have changed over the last couple of years. How long have you been involved with NORML?
So I've been involved since my sophomore year, and I'm in my senior year now for the past 2.5 years, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, and it really has been interesting to see a change. Our first year on campus, when we have a big banner that says marijuana, and then underneath it, safer than alcohol, and that always attracts a lot of attention when we are set up on campus. And the first few years, especially the first year, there's a lot more negative reactions, I would say, and recently it's been much more positive. The last one we only had one person come up and, try to argue with us. Most people were, very supportive and letting us know that they support what we're doing, which has been really interesting to see a change just on one campus in a few short years.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that is just people excited to see somebody on campus that's not just screaming Bible verses at them or something like that. But that's really interesting. So from the time that you joined, or first started becoming interested in this topic, do you feel like even people that you know have changed their opinions? Is it something that's fluid, or
I think the country as a whole is changing drastically. We're kind of in that transition period. Let's see. I want to say back in 2007 there was like a 35% approval of marijuana, and now it's well over 50% of the nation believes it should be legalized. So I think that's really encouraging news. But the fact that it's not 100 says we still have work to do.
Okay. Yeah, and if I'm sure that there's been a lot of changes, and you've had a very long career. But has there been any? Do you sense any of that change with the way that the laws are enforced in the last few years?
There has been some change. I mean, we're in a situation right now where nationally over half of the states or jurisdictions have either medical marijuana or decriminalized marijuana. When you start looking, the tide is clearly turning. Mm-hmm. I don't know that Indiana is going to be anywhere near the front of that tide at any point in time, but there have been some efforts by Senator Karen Tallian from up in northwest Indiana. She's proposed medical marijuana bills and some decriminalization for, I think, the last 4 or 5 years in the Indiana Senate. They haven't really gotten anywhere. Mm-hmm. I think this year's the first year she's even gotten to a point where they've allowed a hearing in one of the subcommittees. A lot of science is helping out, and a lot of experiences in other states is helping out to see that there are benefits to medical marijuana, so people are opening their minds a little bit. I think a lot of it is a generational shift too. You're at a point where most of the college students, their parents grew up in the 60s smoking marijuana. And it's hard for people who've experienced marijuana to really say, okay, this is really a dangerous drug, because the facts and the science show it's not. And I think it's a little bit hypocritical for parents to be saying that when anybody can go online and see the real evidence and the scientific evidence that marijuana can be used for medicine for dozens and dozens of really good causes, and it's very, very safe.
And Ethan, did you, when did you start becoming interested in this topic? When was it something that was a passion for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I was a product of the DARE program growing up throughout. Yeah, I'm sure you were as well. Yeah. So through like junior high, I had this very negative attitude towards marijuana, and then high school, I kind of started maybe it's not as bad as what they said. And by the time I was in college, I certainly was much more educated on the facts about marijuana and all the different things that they tell you, the addictiveness of it and how. Just different. I was much more educated and open. I think the college experience also, really opened me up and let me see a lot of, there's a lot more to the world than the little picture I've been painted as a child. So I would say the beginning of college is really when that interest started for me.
Sure. Well, we'll be talking a lot more about that, as well as what might be coming up in Indiana with Senate Bill 15 and some other things in the federal and state level. Stay with us. Welcome back to Face to Face. We are here talking with Ethan Wieland and Andrew Maternowski about marijuana and the many laws that govern it in our country. Currently, there are 28 states that have some form of legalized cannabis use or possession. Indiana is currently not among one of those states. So we were talking about, when, Ethan, your opinion about marijuana kind of shifted, or when you first became passionate about the law. I think that's something that people are becoming a lot more passionate about. Either side that they're on, I guess the renewed interest in the topic, or at least inspired interest in the topic, is kind of forcing a lot of people to have very strong opinions. What I'm interested in hearing about you guys who know much more about this than I do is why Indiana is not currently one of those 28 states.
Indiana is a very conservative state across the board, and like most conservative people and people with conservative opinions, they're not willing to listen to that. They don't want to hear about marijuana being something that could be positive as far as medical marijuana, and think that it's a gateway drug that's going to lead, you're going to end up smoking a joint, and the next day your child's going to be, a street hooker, strung out on heroin.
Sure.
They don't want to hear that. Everybody's been brainwashed with the whole gateway concept. As many people who smoked marijuana ended up on heroin as people who drank milk and ended up on heroin. So the gateway theory has been bought and sold, and it's hard to get away from that.
Yeah.
Ethan?
And you can, just the reasoning behind that gateway theory a little bit, you can correlate any two pieces of data to make them work. I've seen graphs that correlate the number of, the number of lemons imported from Mexico and the number of traffic fatalities in the same year. And as you can see, there's a clear, correlation between how many lemons we import and traffic fatalities. But you can correlate any two numbers, and I think that's helped the anti side of things. They come up with statistics that support their cause, when in reality those statistics don't really mean anything. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and that's something that I hear a lot. When I'm talking to people about this topic, that the spurious correlation between somebody starts smoking marijuana and then it leads them down a bad path. You were speaking about a little bit of the science of it. Where kind of is that in the national discourse? Is this something that people?
Well, if you believe a lot of politicians, they'll say, like Hillary Clinton was saying during the campaign, is, "I'll think about it, but we need more research." Marijuana is one of the most researched drugs out there. You start comparing the number of trials and studies done on marijuana, we're talking 30, 40, 50,000 reported published papers. You can go on the FDA website and find published papers in the single digits for medicines that have been approved by the FDA, compared to everything we know about marijuana going back for decades. Yet everybody wants to talk about, well, we need to look at it, we need to study it and see how it really works. Well, it's clear that it works as medicine for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Now, so we need to look at the data, we need to look at the research. What causes that? Is that politicians saying, the public is kind of split and I don't want to, alienate any voters by making a strong opinion on something that's not very...
Catch the wind.
Yeah.
Catch the wind. Politicians are there to get elected, and they're going to play to the masses. And until we get a critical point in Indiana that says we really do want to look at this, and it's a critical voting mass, they're not going to change.
Now, did for example, I mentioned that there's 28 states with some form of legalized cannabis use or possession or something like that. And obviously the law varies state by state to some extent. And you can include the District of Columbia in that as well, which is fully legalized recreationally. We were talking about the effect of conservatism on that. And, I'm sure that has some sort of effect. What I was wondering was, for example, there's several states that went red in 2016 that have it legalized. For example, Indiana, of the 4 states that border it, 3 of them have some sort of legalized cannabis use or possession. Illinois in 2013, Michigan passed a House resolution in 2008, and then Ohio as recently as 2016. So, what is it about Indiana that makes it different from those states?
Well, I'm not from Indiana. I'm from Illinois, so it's a little bit different. But I can say that, I don't know, someone explained it to me, someone from Indiana explained it to me that Indiana was supposed to be in the South, and they're just a northern state that's in the South. And
that's the Northern Bible.
Right. So that's really all I think it's just been so influenced for so many years by the same, I think conservatism at its core is all about, preserving what was good, in the past. And I think there's just a reluctance to change is the biggest thing. There's this fear that if we change, we don't know exactly how things will go, and so it's not even worth it to change. But I think that's a very misled message because things aren't, rosy as they are. I mean, just the racial aspect of marijuana prohibition a black person in Indiana is almost 3.4 times more likely to be arrested for possession than a Caucasian person. And I find that quite appalling. I think that's, that's not good at all. It's disturbing almost.
And almost 30 years of criminal defense work, I can confirm those numbers. That's the reality of it in Indiana. Another aspect that we have in Indiana that kind of tugs both ways is the libertarian concept of conservatism. Is I don't want the government telling me what I can do with my body. And there are a lot of people in the Libertarian Party and very conservative Republicans and even very conservative Democrats who will say this should be a medical decision that someone should be able to make with their doctor and keep the government out of what we're doing. So you have a little bit of that can help it sometimes with this argument. The other issue you have in Indiana is basically financial. And are we willing to put the tax money to enforcement of misdemeanor marijuana offenses, and how many we have, hundreds of thousands a year in Indiana, when we're not locking anybody up for marijuana for the most part in Indiana anymore. That's changed. That's hopefully going to continue to change. But a lot more people are looking at probation, but it's still an incredible drain on the criminal justice system.
Well, certainly a very complex issue, and we'll be right back to talk about it more after these messages. Welcome back to Face to Face. We're talking about marijuana law today, and let's get right back into it. So we were talking about the state level, why Indiana maybe still has prohibitive marijuana laws, whereas other states, even the ones that border it, are in the process of kind of changing those laws. I'd like to talk about the federal level, because that's something where I think there's a lot of confusion between people, and I think that you could definitely illuminate that situation with us. So federal level, where's marijuana?
Marijuana has been, and always will be illegal in federal law. There's not a misunderstanding. Federally, marijuana is illegal. Any marijuana offense could be a federal offense. It's a matter of the Department of Justice making it a priority or not. So you have a number of states where there are medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. Under the Obama administration, the Department of Justice made it a policy after, I think, the first 2 years in California of raiding dispensaries and things, to say that if you were operating legally under your state law's requirements, so if you're following state law, the feds were not going to mess with you. Okay, where that's going to be now is completely up in the air, but I don't have a good feeling about where it's going.
Right. Any thoughts on where people on campus are kind of thinking about the new administration?
I've heard mixed things. So I get on Twitter and things like that a lot, and I've heard I think there was something I read about a bill Trump proposed that was going to put into law the Obama approach to marijuana, saying let's let states be alone. And I think there's a strong push for that within the Republican Party. I would say that, that the conservative, the libertarian style conservatism that says, let's just let the states deal with it. And I think that came up a lot during the presidential debates too, this is an issue for the states. But then there's also the side of the administration that really wants to, crack down law and order, and there's a lot of rhetoric like that, and especially with the new head of the Department of Justice as well.
Yeah, it seems to be, at least to me and to most people, that it's a bit of a transient issue and something that is, we're not really sure which way it will go. President Trump, obviously, as a candidate and a private citizen, said that he was interested in medical marijuana, that he, not for himself, but that he was interested in that, and that I think the exact quote was that he was interested in leaving it up to the states in a lot of cases. As far as the new attorney general, he's somebody who has said in the past that marijuana is a big issue for him. So when there is that kind of debate, at least right now, for example, if you are operating a dispensary or something in the state of Colorado or California, is the DEA doing raids, cracking down?
No, there have been no new actions that I'm aware of since the change in administration. So everybody's, I think, very nervous, and at some points, because of the let the states handle it rhetoric that was going on during the campaign, they're thinking maybe it's going to survive. Mm-hmm. But there are, career law enforcement people who don't want it, have always been against it, and they're going to be encouraging it to be cracked down upon.
Yeah, so let's localize the issue. At least in the state of Indiana, this is something that you certainly have a lot of expertise in. Where is that in the state law enforcement, county law enforcement? Is it something that you feel is very strictly enforced, or is it?
It runs a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
If you'll have somebody in some of the bigger cities, or even some of the small cities, if an officer pulls them over and they smell marijuana in the car, the officer might just throw it out. You might get a ticket instead of getting arrested and taken to the jail and forced to bond out. Other counties, other police officers, it varies from police officer to officer, what they choose to do at that given time. One of the problems is the discretion, and it's not a uniform situation. So if you happen to be somebody that the police might not be a fan of, and you have a joint in the car, you're going to jail and you're going to have to bond out. In some counties that may take 2 or 3 days. In Marion County, Indianapolis, you could be in jail for 24 to 36 hours because you have to get processed through first. In other places, an officer has the discretion to not arrest you and just give you a ticket with a summons to court to appear on it. In Tippecanoe County, a lot of cases with students involved, they're simply getting summonses with court dates, and then at some point in time, you'll get a notice of an official court date, and you won't actually be taken into custody.
Now, is normal a place that people who maybe have not had legal troubles in the past, who are now find themselves with a disciplinary referral or perhaps an arrest or a court summons, do they come to Normal for advice?
Yes, all the time. We get emails at least every other week with someone on campus. Maybe not every other, maybe several times a semester. I'll say that.
Sure.
About I got caught with marijuana. What do I do? What are my next steps? And we're always happy to meet with any student on campus that does that. We've done it many times in the past, and we actually refer them often to this guy over here because that's his job. So,
certainly. So, yeah, we were talking about how it varies state to state. It varies even in the state level, county to county.
Yeah.
It varies how. For example, like what is your perception of the way that marijuana laws are enforced on campus?
Actually, I just attended a city council meeting beginning of last month, where they were, discussing their year achievements. And unfortunately, we had some bad news, or for me it was. I think everyone else thought it was good news. Arrests were up 70% in year 2016, and majority of that was drug offenses, which I think is a little bit scary news to hear, because we have this feeling that we're on the progressive part of Indiana, Lafayette is, and to hear that news is a little bit, jarring. We got to keep up the fight. And most of those offenses apparently came from traffic stops.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other things that Purdue Normal does do is, and it's going to be March 22nd, I think at 6 or 7 p.m.
7 p.m. Just checked.
It's Ask a Lawyer Night. For the last maybe 5 or 6 years, I've come up and speak to students and do a question and answer session about what to do when you encounter the police or if you get arrested and charged, and how to deal with that.
So yeah, let's talk about that event, because I think that's something that a lot of our viewers are students, and they maybe have a lot of the same questions that somebody would want. Not even if they're not a marijuana user, maybe they just are interested in from the libertarian perspective. What are my rights when I'm in a situation like this? So let's talk about that. Can you tell us a little bit about Ask a Lawyer? How it's
So
how long it's been
it'll be Wednesday the 22nd, as you said. It's next week, I believe, at 7 p.m. in Beering 2290. If you're interested in going. And it's basically we have him come in. He sits up at the front, and we just pretty much open the floor up to any questions from the audience. So anyone can ask any question they have about marijuana laws, what their rights are, as he said. And it's always a great night. It's probably our members' favorite meeting every year, just because of how personal it is, and it's free legal advice, so it's not a bad deal by any means.
Sure, absolutely.
It's free legal advice, and I'm not there generating clients.
Yeah.
I end up with 5 or 10 clients every time, but it's not income producing. I have represented college students, high school students throughout the state, for the last 15 years pro bono, which is for free. And I do that for probably 10 to 15 Purdue students a semester.
Sure. So at this, at Ask a Lawyer, whatever the most recent one, or over the time that you've been doing it, what are some of the kind of like themes of the questions? What are some of the questions that you get most often? Some of the ones that maybe you think everyone should know the answer to?
What to do if the police knock on your door, and what to do if you're pulled over by the police and they want to search your car, and how to interact with the police. I'd say 75% of the questions are along that line.
Sure.
Others are, I'm not asking for me, but asking for a friend,
right?
type of questions. But it can go run the gamut to, I have this case from when I was in high school. What should I have done? What should I do differently? And the main advice I always give is marijuana is illegal, and until that changes, you're risking your student status. You could be suspended. You could be thrown out of the university. If you live on campus, you can be evicted. I don't think that's what they call it, but you could be kicked out of the living on campus, and you could lose your financial aid.
Sure. So we were talking about the statistics on Purdue's campus, and I was, in accordance with the Clery Act, of course, Purdue police have to remit the statistics of their arrests and various different things. And you're talking about in 2016 arrests being up 70%. I know that in the year 2015 we had 82 drug-related arrests on campus property, 45 on campus student housing, and 32 on public property in the Purdue area. And obviously that's been going up, and from projections from just the last 2 months in 2017, they seem to be on the rise. What's causing that? Is it a increased use of marijuana as it becomes less stigmatized?
It could be. I think that's one factor. Another factor could be the reporting requirements.
Right.
Are they reporting custodial arrests as those 80-some arrests? And that doesn't include the 75 or 100 citations or summonses that they handed out, which wouldn't constitute a criminal arrest at that point. And I know with different police agencies reporting things, they will tend to report certain things a different way to kind of fudge the numbers. So that goes on in some campaigns where we're talking about crime is up or not. No, it's just that you've reported it differently.
Sure, a lot of fuzzy math going on.
But a lot of it is I think more students are aware that marijuana isn't going to turn you into a heroin addict, and there are a lot of benefits to it. Using self-medicating, unfortunately, which is why I think we should be looking more at medical uses in Indiana.
Sure, and that's obviously a very difficult question to answer. We have just a little bit of time left, and I wanted to talk a bit about what's going on in the Indiana State House right now. There's a Senate bill that's proposing medical cannabis use, or actually it's a cannabis extract. If people are unfamiliar with that, it doesn't contain enough THC, the active compound, to get one to an intoxicated state, but it might have medical benefits for people with epilepsy. That's specifically what the bill says. So what are your hopes for that? Do you think that's something that's going to pass, or something that'll lead to further?
Well, there's the part that hopes that it passes because it's progress. But then you're recognizing that there are medical benefits to it, and then that raises questions about whether it should still be in Schedule 1.
So slippery slope.
Yeah.
Yes. But then you have, I've seen videos of parents with their infants where they've gone out to Colorado and come back with CBD and THC oils, and they are medicating their child, and you see the child having spasms and seizures, and in a matter of less than 5 minutes.
All right, Ethan, last word on this, hopes for the future?
Yeah, I always have high hopes. I'm an optimistic person. I always think it'll always pass, and I've been disappointed so far, but I, again, am hoping that this one will surprise me.
Well, we'll see how it goes. Thank you to both my guests for being here tonight on Face to Face, and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Zach Riddle.